For our Wednesday waddle today, we enter the city of York through its ancient city wall at Monk's Bar, as people have been doing since the 14th century. York Minster, a Gothic cathedral, is one of the largest of its kind in Northern Europe, and as such is visible from much of the city. Devoted to St. Peter, the Minster has a very wide decorated Gothic nave and chapter house, a perpendicular Gothic choir, and East End and Early English north and south transepts. The nave contains the west window, constructed in 1338, and over the Lady Chapel in the East End is the great east window, finished in 1408, the largest expanse of medieval stained glass in the world. In the north transept is the Five Sisters window, each lancet being over 53 feet high. The south transept contains a rose window, while the west window contains a heart-shaped design, colloquially known as the Heart of Yorkshire. As we walk around the Minster Close, we come to St. William's College. The building's main door has a mouse carving by Robert Thompson, the famous Mousy Thompson of Kilburn. At the south side of the Minster, we come to St. Michael le Belfry. Built unusually all in one go, St. Michael's replaced an earlier church on the site during the reign of Henry VIII, and sits at the end of Petergate in the shadow of the Minster. It is famous for being the place where Guy Fawkes was baptised in 1570, and many visitors come to see the enlarged copy of his baptismal entry in the church's registers. From Petergate we turn right into Stonegate. Stonegate is an attractive old street full of interesting little shops, like the Teddy Bear shop. This is Mulberry Hall, one of York's oldest buildings, constructed in 1434. The Old Star Inn, York's oldest pub, dates back to 1644, when it was used as a field hospital during England's Civil War. This is Barley Hall, a restored former priory dating back from the 14th century, with a high-ceilinged great hall and exposed timbers. From Stonegate we come into St Helens Square, and we see the famous Betty's Tea Rooms, which were modelled on the RMS Queen Mary cruise liner and became a particular favourite of American and Canadian bombers stationed around York during the Second World War. The Georgian-style mansion house is the home of the Lord Mayor of York. It was completed in 1732. And it houses a large collection of silver, including York's Great Sword of State. We turn left into Coney Street and we find this Georgian building which once provided judges' lodgings. Opposite is St Martin's Church. Its earliest masonry is from 1080. Largely destroyed in a bombing raid in 1942, the 15th century tower and south aisle remain. The 1437 St Martin window, removed before the raid for safety, is the largest medieval window in York outside the Minster. This church is famous for its prominent clock from 1778 that overhangs the street, topped by the figure of a naval officer. We turn left, then left again into Parliament Street and soak up the atmosphere of the St Nicholas Fair.
Got different styles of architecture there.
This includes Thor's Teepee Bar. Towards the top of Parliament Street, we turn right into the Shambles Market. Here you can find over 70 stalls offering something for everyone, including local arts, crafts, fresh food, fashion, flowers, and lots more. The market is open every day from 9 AM to 5, and there are lots and lots of eateries too, so time for a quick cup of tea. Five snickelways lead off the Shambles Market onto the Shambles. The Shambles is an old street lined with overhanging timber frame buildings, some dating back as far as the 14th century. In 1872, there were 25 butchers' shops located along this street, but now none remain. At the southern end of the Shambles, we turn left to reach the Whatmy Gate, which is one of York's smallest streets. The city's whipping posts and stocks were here in the Middle Ages. Opposite is the Fossgate area of York with its fine shops and restaurants. Walk beneath the magnificent coat of arms, and tucked behind the shops and cafes you will find the Merchant Adventurers Hall. The hall is a 14th century timber framed building with its own chapel, undercroft, great hall and peaceful gardens overlooking the River Foss. Heading towards All Saints Church and along Coppergate, crossing the road to King Street takes us down to the river where we're going to meet our boat. Our boat initially leaves the Old Port District at King's Staithe. This cruise offers a fantastic chance to look out for wildlife, including swans, cormorants and kingfishers. But unfortunately today it is very cold and very misty. York was built on the joining of two rivers, the Ouse and the Foss. The choosing of this site was for military and practical purposes. The land between the two rivers was easily defended from invaders and also supplied two routes for trade in and out of the city. The Romans are believed to have used both rivers for trade purposes nearly 2 millennia ago. The Blue Bridge is at the point where the Foss flows into the Ouse. The cruise takes us under the impressive York Millennium Bridge, which was opened in 2001. We are leaving the outskirts of the city and are sailing past the site of the Battle of Fulford, arguably one of the most significant in the history of the United Kingdom. We then pass Clementhorpe and the York bypass before coming to the Bishop's Palace.
right hand side is Bishop Thorpe Palace, the official residence of His Grace the Archbishop of York, John Sentiment. He's the 97th person to hold the second highest position in the Church of England, and is answerable only to Her Majesty the Queen. John Sentiment was born in Uganda, but had to flee the country in the early 1970s after being persecuted by Idi Amin. Before he was Archbishop of York, John Sentiment was the Bishop of Birmingham. The story of Bishop Thorpe Palace starts at the beginning of the 13th century, when Archbishop Walter de Grey moved from a site in Cawood, a village a further 10 miles downstream from York, and bought the manor house in the village of Thorpe St Andrew, or St Andrew Thorpe, now known as Bishop Thorpe. He demolished his manor house and used some of the materials to start a new one in 1241. The building was completed around 1250 and consisted of a great hall, chapel and the Archbishop's rooms. In 1364, private rooms were added by Archbishop Thoresby, and in 1483 a further extension doubled the residential part of the building and improved its kitchens. In 1647, Bishop Thorpe Palace was sold by the church to Colonel White. He added north and south extensions. 2 or 3 years later, the palace was back in the hands of the church, and the Great Hall was rebuilt in unusual brickwork by an archbishop with quite an unusual name, Accepted Fruin. Quadrangular stables were added by Peter Atkinson in 1761, and between 1766 and 69, an extension to the west of the house was added by Archbishop Drummond. This provided a new entrance hall and a drawing room. And for some reason after this date, records either ceased to be kept or simply lost. But we don't know that since then, bakery, brew house, library and gatehouse have all been added. There is a statue of an eagle on the centre of the palace towards the rear and the roof. This signifies the strength and nobility of the church. Although it's not in its original position, it is one of the original parts of the building and is almost 800 years old. The stained glass windows are on this end of the building, a part of the chapel. His Grace himself, his immediate family and the palace staff are the only people allowed inside this room. A service is held here about 8 o'clock every morning when His Grace is in residence. The stone brickwork column, which stands proud of the wall just to the upstream side of the chapel, houses a spiral staircase, and that's just one of the ways of getting into the chapel from the ground floor. The bay window, almost central to the building, is part of the dining hall. Inside this room there are portraits of every Archbishop of York, and also a 22-foot long solid oak carved dining table. There are some stained glass panes in the bay window itself, and the smaller rectangular ones either side. These contain the coats of arms of some of the archbishops, and Archbishop Drummond was responsible for installing these. Directly below the dining hall is what was called the Undercroft. That's the original part of the building by Walter de Grey. The whole of the right-hand side is taken up by staff accommodation and kitchens. There are 60 rooms in Bishop Thorpe Palace. 12 of these are in the basement and are never used due to winter flooding problems. If you look to the roof of the building, you see there's a flag at the top of the flagpole today, and this indicates His Grace is in residence at the moment. Bishop Thorpe Palace today is not only the home of the Archbishop, it's also used to entertain dignitaries. Members of the royal family have been known to stay there, including the late Queen Mother. It's also used for providing office accommodation for the chaplains and secretariat. Bishop Thorpe Palace stands in 9 acres of grounds.
We are coming up to Fulford Hall, also known as Waterfulford Hall. It is the grandest house in Fulford village and the old seat of the Key family. The river is home to 4 rowing clubs. It is also regularly populated by lots of private motor cruisers and narrowboats visiting the city. The River Ouse connects to the rest of the inland waterways network. The Vikings famously arrived in York by river back in the 9th century. They were famed for their seamanship and navigation skills, as well as being excellent shipbuilders. The River Ouse may have delivered us the Vikings, but in later years it also delivered various commodities to the riverside warehouses that are used to line the banks of the river. Many have now been converted into apartments. At one time, York was the third largest inland port in the country behind London and then Bristol. Wool was exported from the city to northern Europe, and goods like coal, butter and olive oil were all delivered into the city by barge. Rowntrees and Terrys had their cocoa beans delivered up the river into the city to their riverside warehouse before processing them in their factories and churning out millions of chocolate oranges and Kit Kats. The last commodity to be delivered by river was the paper for the printing of the York Press, and this ceased in the 1990s. Having disembarked, we walk south towards Skeldergate Bridge, from where we can see Clifford's Tower. The original York Castle, a wooden construction facing the Ouse River, was built in 1086 by William the Conqueror on top of a high conical hill. Henry III rebuilt the castle in stone in the middle of the 13th century, creating a keep with a unique quatrefoil design supported by an outer bailey wall and a substantial gatehouse. During the Scottish Wars between 1298 and 1338, York Castle was frequently used as a centre of royal administration across England, as well as an important military base for operations. This tower is all that remains of the legendary York Castle. It was named in 1322 after Roger de Clifford was held captive in York and put to death by Edward II for high treason. I return to my caravan, which I have pitched at the Caravan and Motorhome Club site on Terry Avenue next to the river. I hope you've enjoyed this tour around York and our trip up the River Ouse. Thank you for watching.